So I'm supposed to be coming up here and having a talk with you guys about this, the SCAA WCR Coffee Tasters Flavor Wheel. And I'm going to do that. I'm going to teach you a little bit more about it and tell you a little bit more about how it came about. But the conversation that I really want to have with you today is about a closely related but slightly different subject. And that is the idea of collaborative research. Because collaborative research is the thing that brought this flavor wheel into existence. And it's a long story, and I want to tell it to you. This story has a number of characters involving at least 2 separate scientific studies, 5 different institutions, over 3 countries, and hundreds of people participating. And this story, like many great stories, starts with a problem. And the problem I first realized in 2007 in Rwanda. Now, Katie Cargiulo spoke a little bit about the scene in Rwanda in the early 2000s. Rwanda didn't have a reputation for specialty coffee at all. It had grown coffee for 100 years, but the price was very low and the quality was thought to be very low. And that was mainly because of processing problems. It was widely aware that processing was turning great agricultural coffee in Rwanda into poor coffee at the time of shipment. And so the solution that was led by projects like the Pearl Project and the Spread Project, led by Dr. Tim Schilling, and the insight was if you can improve coffee processing in Rwanda, we can improve livelihoods to farmers and develop a new origin of great coffee. It's a great plan, right? Except they had an issue. They needed to know how to process the coffee. Now, because there was no tradition of great coffee processing in Rwanda, they had to make it up from scratch. Now, they might have decided to just import a technique from a neighboring country like Kenya or Ethiopia, or from as far away as Central America. But the decision was, let's try to see if we can zero in on appropriate processing for Rwanda itself as a country. And so the idea was sprouted to have a series of experiments. And these experiments would test different aspects of coffee processing in Rwanda. How ripe you picked the coffee, how long you stored the coffee before you pulped it, what type of machine you used to pulp it, how long you fermented it, etc. Some things that really interest coffee farmers and coffee mill managers, but also coffee buyers like ourselves. We want to know what to communicate to farmers when they ask us questions about how long I should produce coffee, etc. So because Tim Schilling is a scientist, he knew how to design the experiment, and we collaborated on different aspects that we were curious about, fermentation times, machines, etc. And we meticulously and rigorously went through the process of a 1.5 years worth of experiments that were scrupulously blind, randomized, coded, kept separate, organized all in Rwanda, and shipped to 2 different cupping labs in the United States for testing. And we actually presented the findings of that research at the very first symposium in the United States in 2008. And although the results were interesting and they taught us a few things, they were actually really kind of terrifying. Because what we learned was that our system of evaluating the quality of coffee, the cupping and 100-point scoring system that we're all very familiar with, wasn't very well suited for agricultural research that we were trying to do. Although we were able to tease out some results from all of this work, what we really learned is that the information, our measurement system, wasn't well suited for the task. And since you can't change what you can't measure, we knew we had a big problem on our hands. Now, these very same experiments grew into the organization that we now know as World Coffee Research. And Dr. Schilling is still at the head of World Coffee Research. And he knew from his experience as World Coffee Research tried to develop new genetic varieties of coffee to be adapted to climate change, etc. The really important work that WCR is trying to do, they knew that the first thing that they needed to do was develop a better tool for assessing the kind of things that we were curious about in this kind of research. And we knew that the system that we were using wasn't appropriate for the task. So Dr. Schilling and others looked out into the other food science world and saw what they did. And he discovered that there was actually a whole different system that we didn't use in coffee. And this system is called sensory descriptive analysis. Now, sensory descriptive analysis sounds a lot like what we do when we taste coffee and describe it and score it, right? But it's actually pretty different. And I came to learn about this process over the last few years, and I'm going to try to explain the way that works to you. And to do that, I'm going to introduce you to Jackie. Now, Jackie is a member of the sensory panel at Kansas State University. Now, Jackie tastes things for a living. She tastes coffee and wine and chocolate and saltine crackers and even dog food. Yes, they taste dog food there. But the thing is about Jackie is she's not an expert at coffee or wine or chocolate or meat or dog food. And this is actually pretty important. She doesn't have any expertise in these foods, and that allows her to be clear-headed when she tastes coffee. In fact, I call Jackie and her colleagues as sort of tasting machines, almost like tasting robots. They're trained to taste things and document them, and that's it, without judgment or anything. And these panels, like the one Jackie's on, wind up working like an instrument, like a sort of machine that is able to accurately and objectively rate the flavor of a food by documenting what their experience of it is. What Jackie and her colleagues needed to do at Kansas State was develop a system of instructions, because if the panel is a machine, every machine needs a set of instructions to work. And in sensory descriptive analysis, that set of instructions is known as a lexicon. Now, a lexicon is a dictionary. It's a list of terms that you can use when you're doing tasting. We're familiar with this idea when we think about flavor wheels or the Neda Cafe kit. These are lists of concepts, of words that we can associate with a foodstuff. Now, to develop a lexicon for coffee, what they had to do was taste a lot of coffee. Over the course of more than a year, they tasted hundreds of coffee samples and documented all the flavors that they knew as sensory panelists that they perceived in the coffee. And then they verified over and over again that they tasted those same things in coffee. And at the end, they wound up with a list of 110 words that had been verified that they were able to repeatably taste in coffee. And that is what's called the World Coffee Research Sensory Lexicon. There's some printed out there that you may have seen. Now, the cool thing about the sensory lexicon is it's not only a comprehensive set of flavor descriptors that exist in coffee. It also is a recipe book telling you how to prepare reference standards for every single one of those descriptors. These are critically important because they allow a panel in one place, say Kansas, to be on the exact same page as a panel in San Francisco or New York or London or Singapore. So each of these tasters is talking about the same thing so that they can repeat the experience that they're testing. Now, when I reviewed the sensory lexicon, I couldn't help but compare it to the tool that we already used for this purpose, which was the SCAA Coffee Taster's Flavor Wheel. And the good news is there was a lot of overlap. There was about 40 terms that were either exactly the same or about the same. But it was very clear that the sensory lexicon, being based on a repeatable scientific study, was actually a much clearer representation of the flavors that exist in coffee that is familiar to all of us. And we knew that it was an ideal source document to do our next edition, the first edition in many years of the Coffee Taster's Flavor Wheel. But then the next question came to us, which is, well, okay, all we've got is a list of words. How do we arrange that in a tool that is useful to coffee tasters? So with that question, coffee science manager Emma Sage from the Specialty Coffee Association took our problem to University of California at Davis, and specifically this person. This is Molly Spencer. She's a PhD candidate in sensory science at UC Davis. And she designed a system for us to figure out a way to arrange these. And let me explain to you how it worked. First, she took all the terms, and from the, actually, most of the terms, all of the terms that you taste or smell from the lexicon, and built a computer program around it. Now, this computer program allowed you to drag and drop words, so you could put words next to each other that belonged next to each other, or even group words underneath other words. You can see on this slide, you can see how cinnamon, clove, and nutmeg are grouped underneath the spice brown grouping, which is itself a subset of brown. This makes logical sense to people, and this was a logical test. This was showing how tasters would organize words when given the task. Now, Molly and Emma then gave this test to a number of coffee tasters and also a number of sensory panelists that were working there at UC Davis. And then they took all of that data and put it into a machine and subjected it to some sophisticated statistical analysis, and it gave us documents like this. So this is the result of a thing called an agglomerative hierarchical clustering exercise, and I can't believe I said it on stage. Thank you. It's walking a tightrope, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, so it spits out this dendrogram. Did you hear me say clustering? So these are clusters of words that were associated with each other in the test. So as coffee tasters or sensory panelists group things together, it shows on this dendrogram. All the descriptors are at the bottom, and each of those 9 colors represents a cluster of words that those tasters associated with each other. Now, one of the cool things about this exercise is that the coffee tasting group and the sensory panelist group, their data was very similar to each other. And so that gave us a lot of confidence in the results. So we knew that this was highly representative of how tasters actually group terms together. Another thing it spit out was this scatter plot. And this was actually very useful in laying out the circularity of the wheel, because you can see it sort of arranges itself in a circle, and the descriptors clump naturally in these sort of clusters: roasted, spices, sweet flavors, nutty, cocoa, floral, fruity, etc. And so what these two things gave us, what these two outputs gave us, was a way to build a framework for a new flavor wheel. By using the groups from the AHC analysis and the circular arrangement from the scatter plot, we were able to combine those and create this framework. But this is only a framework, right? What's it lacking? Any people think about colors when they taste things? Many of us do. There's a strong association between our perception of color and our perception of smell and taste, i.e. flavor. And so we knew we needed to get the colors right in the wheel. So we did one more study, this time with a design group in London called One Darnley Road. And they went out to seek and see if we could find the perfect red of a cherry or the perfect yellow of lemon to really evoke that sense of color at the same time that we had the descriptor and the reference and the arrangement from the studies. So that was what we got, was the output of all of that work was the flavor wheel you see there. Now, because of all of that sort of intel inside this work, there's some interesting things about the wheel. What you have is 3 different tiers of flavors, and those are representative in that dendrogram grouping that you first saw. And then what that makes possible is this sort of center-out methodology. So by starting in the center of the wheel, you can use the wheel and say, okay, what do I taste here? Do I taste fruitiness? Okay, if I taste fruitiness, what kind of fruitiness is it? Is it dried fruit? Is it berries? Is it citrus fruit? Is it something else? If it's citrus fruit, what kind of citrus is it? Grapefruit, orange, lemon, or lime? Lemon, there you go, you've got a descriptor, and you've worked your way out. You can go to the middle and start again. There's also one other little interesting thing about the wheel, is that data that was given to us allowed us to see how closely related tasters found these flavors. And so we were able to represent that on the flavor wheel by a series of gaps. If there's no gaps between flavors, that means that the tasters associated them very closely with each other. If they associated them slightly less closely with each other, we put a small gap in between. And then if there was a large disassociation between flavors in the study that we did, we put a large gap that extended all the way to the middle. So that way, just by looking at this tool, you can see on average, how closely tasters associated these flavors. Our final step required a lot of volunteer work to translate the wheels into English, Korean, Spanish, Chinese, German, and Portuguese, attempting to share our work with the globe. So we're really excited and very grateful for all the help of everyone that put their work into this. And this brings to mind the idea of inventorship. So this is a picture of Thomas Edison, and this is a picture that most people associate with innovation or inventiveness or exploration or research. But really, innovation and invention rarely looks anything like a sole person working alone in a lab. Really, research and innovation looks like this. It's a lot of people working together, collaboratively, cooperatively, building on each other's insights and knowledge to develop something new together. And that's what I'm really excited about, and that's what I think the Flavor Wheel demonstrates, is a commitment to working together, to sharing our resources, to pulling together to develop something useful to the community. And we're a community too. And so I'll ask you, what will we do next together? What new insights do we need to have? What new explorations can we do together? And that's the question I'll leave you with. Thank you.